walk you through a strategy for service BDC in your dealerships. Some of you have them, some of you do not, but either way, it won't matter tonight, because tonight, frankly, you get to zoom out, you get to gather some valuable information from an organization in Traver Connect who catches a lot of calls. How about that? So Dave, with that, let's start with the very first slide. And I was talking to Dave today, so you can go to the next slide. There's slide 2. I did say the very first. I'm wrong. Pre-service BDC. So you don't have a service BDC, and there's this one overriding belief. I'm talking to Dave, and I said, Dave, let me ask you. I said, some questions in terms of why stores don't have. And he said, well, I think there's an overriding belief. I think it's better to have my advisors talk to the customer than a BDC agent. And I kind of nodded my head and I said, yeah, I understand. So what I thought I'd do first is let you go to the next screen, if you would, Dave. Can you guys see this? This is a customer experience survey. And what we have is we have an automated tool where we make outbound calls to dealers that want us to and say, okay, give us sort of the X-ray, the MRI on what our call structure sounds like and looks like. And so we have 5 or 6 fundamental steps that should happen in each call, each service call. But the other thing that's going on is we're managing how long did the call take? How long did it take for somebody that could help us actually to get to us? Was it 30 seconds? Was it a minute? Was it 2 minutes? Did it never happen? How many of those were we unable to connect with somebody who could help us? What's interesting is in our industry today, with all the tools, all the help we have, 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 5 calls are still offline. And it's a very formal word for not answered. Either they're on hold too long and the customer jumps off, or they're on hold and they finally give up. What I want to do, though, is I don't want you to believe me because I'm telling you. What I want to do tonight is I'd like to have you listen to a couple calls. So this particular CES is to a store, and I tried to disguise who it is, okay? So I've picked up after the first 25 or 6 seconds, and we've been ringing to the switchboard. I'm going to put this on speaker, and then I'm going to play this, and I want you to, hopefully you can hear this thing. And I want you to hear this call. This is the very first column, number 1. The guy does answer. He does set an appointment. And I want you to hear the process. Okay, you ready? Here we go.
Thank you. Let me go. BMW service. Yes, I'd like to make a service appointment. Okay, what kind of service do you for you? Well, I know I definitely need to get the oil changed, but I would like to have the brakes looked at as well, and then I would like a diagnostic run on the vehicle, please.
Hard to hear, John.
Next Thursday or Friday or next week. Okay, next Thursday would work fine. What's the call number?
I don't think that's going to work. Yeah, I'm getting feedback because my voice is on. Hang on one sec. Let me try this. Where it has my number on the screen, can you mute me, Dave? You see it? It says 972.
All right, go ahead. I think muting you is making it so we can't hear you at all, John. Still echo. Yeah, that's not working, John.
and a half. And what?
Now you're an echo.
Tell you what. How about there? Can you hear me?
You're just pretty quiet. That's all.
I just dropped. How about that? Better?
That's better.
Okay, good. So I'll send you the 3 calls, but you basically have a call by a real advisor who he sets the appointment, guys, but it's minimalist. Okay. And so when you think about what an advisor does, Scott Frazee, who runs a handful of Kia stores in the Midwest, came to us years ago and brought us a store, then gave us a second store his, and I think we have 4 or 5 stores today. And they do a great job. He had tried and built his own service BDC and kind of went down the road and realized how much more expensive it was, and the management and the time and all these other things. But one of the things he told me is, he said, look, the consistency and the statement of work in the call, he said, my advisors write 15 ROs a day. He said they're going to handle status calls during the day. They're going to touch technicians during the day. They're going to handle drive-ups during the day. And for me to ask them to take tomorrow or the next day's calls, appointments that are coming in today, they're going to handle another 15 to 20 calls and expect them to do that job well as active delivery and cashiering and all these other things. It's just not realistic. He said, I hadn't done that job in a long time. Until I realized I was overshooting. So, what I wanted to show you second was the second call gets to a receptionist. They try and transfer it to an advisor, and that's why it's red. They were never able to get to an advisor. So the question is, what's a good business reason for having a service BDC is, number one, first column, to have a statement of work that is exactly what you want to represent from an experience standpoint. Number two, to never have to deal with somebody not being able to get to the right person. What's interesting is before we drive over a tire profiles piece of equipment, before we light up a tablet with red, yellow, green, before we talk about mock or VG or any pre-sold maintenance package or anything else, there's a phone. 7 out of 10 repair orders start today. Those are the numbers. If you're writing 1,000 ROs, which is slightly smaller than an average store, that's 700 calls. Okay? So the next one, if you can, is I want to start bouncing through real quick these systems. So your primary KPIs is where I want to take it first. And just, this is simple. You can jump in. There's really 3 big things I would be thinking about. Yes, you want to load the shop. But in order to load the shop, you got to catch the call. One of the things you remember Move That Bus? What was that guy's name?
Ty Pennington.
That's it. Move That Bus. It was like a chant. I remember a guy that I know, Bob Beal, and Bob is a consultant. He was on the board of directors for Focus on the Family for 31 years. First class guy. He's in his 80s. And he told me something during the election, the last time. He said, I think there's an outside chance Trump is going to win the presidency. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He said, he's so good with those 3-word chants. He said, have you ever heard the saying, kill the cat? And I looked at Bob and I said, no. And he said, there's a company overseas that when they start up their assembly line, every morning they yell, they chant together, the whole floor, kill the cat, kill the cat. And I said, Komatsu? And he said, yes, Komatsu. And I said, you're kidding. And he said, do you know who they're talking about? I said, sure, they're talking about Caterpillar. He said, yeah, that's their rallying cry. And he said, what I found is that anyone who has a 3-word chant has a chance to be on the leaderboard. And he said, you think about some of his slogans, drain the swamp, lock her up, etc. And again, this is not meant to be partisan, but I began to think about that. And I thought, well, shoot, we're going to simplify what we're talking about. And what I would say to you is catch the calls. It really starts there. So when you catch the calls, you can drive appointment business using your scheduler. You can provide a consistent scheduling experience.
So before we get to high touch tools, can't say enough about the Update Promise guys and their touchless mobile payment platform, their texting platform with AI built in. But here's the thing, if you set up the visit right, there's continuity throughout that ecosystem, right? Les, when we were in Vegas and you talked about the old axiom of high tech, high touch, you know, I smiled and I thought, man, that was brilliant and it was familiar. I walked away and I thought, well, what's first, the chicken or the egg? And the answer is yes. They're both important. They're both required. And actually, if you do a poor job on the phone, you might not ever get them in the store, or you've set the bar so low, you're going to have a problem. And the opposite would be true too. The third one is creating time for advisors to sell and serve. It's ROT, not ROI, return on time. When you take the calls out of the drive and you centralize them, you know, in your parts department or virtually or both, the bottom line is you're giving back time to the advisors to sell, right? Let's go to the next slide. Your BDC rep. So when the rep is taking the calls, this is the one that's kind of overlooked, okay? So let's go to this next slide 7. And it's not animated, so I'm gonna have to kind of talk you through this one, okay? So when you look at number 1 there, you see service scheduling tool. Everybody knows what we're talking about. X time highway, I'm working directly out of Reynolds, or I'm working out of CDK, great. And that should allow us to load our shop, right? Load the shop. It allows to see availability, how far out we gotta wait to get this type of work. We're loading jobs. As Tully would say, we're selling hours, right? Okay, Tully's smiling somewhere right now. But number 2 is you need a BDC agent system. So let me just kind of present this to you and see if I can't sort of just get you to expand how you're looking at this. So look at calls. You see the funnel? So the calls are coming in. So here's the question. Of those calls coming in, your assumption is they're all appointment opportunities. Just nod your head if you agree. Just nod your head if you agree. Yeah, that's the assumption. But the fact is that some of those are not. Some of those are parts calls. Believe it or not, some of those are for F&I. They just got routed to the wrong place. So the question is, we want to know not just how many are. I'm not here to, I want to just say this. Once we know we have 100 of those that are appointment opportunities, the next question should automatically be, how many of those were scheduled? And then the next question would be, how many of those, everybody, showed? But see, yes. Okay, Ed, you're nodding your head. So without that, it's kind of like on the front end back in the day, hey, you know, we get X amount of phone ups a month. Great. How many do you sell? What's that? What do you mean how many do you sell? Well, what does it matter how many you get if you don't know how many you sell? Does that make sense? So to me, that's in these calls, guys, there's a ton of data. So having a BDC rep tool that you can go from that to over to the right where you see service BDC reporting, and I'm going to kind of unpack that and show you how far you can take. I felt like getting into this in 2011, there was so much information in the service call that is not in a sales call. And I've listened to my share of sales calls and trained on that. But the service call, very, very unique. So let's go to the next one. Let me show you. Okay, next slide. There we go. So the way it would work is this is a typical screen for us where the call comes in and the customer's talking about maintenance. And so we would just touch our maintenance filter, and that's going to go directly to the database that says, okay, we're now, this is a maintenance call. So you don't just know how many calls you're getting, but you know how many maintenance calls. By the way, there's a big push on recalls. So how do I know month over month, quarter over quarter, how many recall calls did you get? How about repair calls or roadside? Parts calls, just general information. So we can touch on any number of these filters, and all of this is trickling down and mapping what's going on. Next. So once you have that data, now you can begin to track calls. So one of the questions Dave and I talked about, I said, Dave, give me a few more questions you want to know. He said, well, I would want to know when the calls come in so I know how to staff. Okay, Dave, this is for you, buddy. Next slide, 10. So let's start by time of day. So we're a contact center. We can tell you millions of calls exactly when you're getting calls. Guys, take a look at this thing. The good news, it's predictable. You primarily have 10 hours a day that has to be staffed. 80% of your calls between 8 and 5. Between 7 and 11% are going to happen. Here's the bad news. Every hour. Dave, there's not really just this small pregnant window. It's pretty close to 10% all stinking day long. So it's steady, and that's the problem with staffing. And you guys already know this because you're back there. You know there's not this 4-hour window where the phones just die, unless we're under COVID-19. All right? So if you're an in-dealership BDC, my best advice, if I were you, would be I'd focusing on staffing a percentage of your calls for 8 to 5 because it's the easiest window to hire people for, and then get virtual backstop, somebody to help you cover when those people don't show for work, because that happens, right? Possibly. And then also outside of those hours. And then virtually all dealerships are going to have a backstop need, because what's going to happen is at lunch, your people go to lunch, and the phones are going to ring because some of those customers are going to call while they're able to go to lunch. So it's just a perfect storm. But that's the hours of the day. And then the next one is the days of the week. So let's touch on slide 11 real quick. And then what I want to show you here is Monday and Tuesday, you're in trouble. So, you're going to handle 40% of your calls the first 2 days of the week. So it's almost impossible to staff a BDC. So basically, everybody's got to be at work on Monday, and the advisors are going to be overrun, but they also need to be able to handle the phones. Another good reason to have backstop support on the early part of the week, but quite frankly, all the time, because when it comes to staffing, you're going to see your costs. Okay, let's go to slide 12. And I'm just touching on some real simple principles here. So those of you that have a front-end background, track your calls to the close. Take the same mentality we were taught on the front end and apply it to the back end. So, okay, I'm going to get X amount of calls. So you already know it's 70% of your gross customer pay, warranty pay, RO count, okay? So an inbound call, how many of those are appointment related? How many were scheduled? How many show? That's kind of the macro mentality that I would have if I were in your shoes. So let's go to the next step. All right, there it is. Now, this is a little takeaway from X Time, a little discovery I had back in like 2013. So we started answering, and we might have had 75 stores, and we're in X Time quite a bit. And they have this dashboard where you can see how you're doing with all your stores, and we can see this from a macro standpoint. What really jumped out at me was this slide. This is literally one of our stores. We just had our graphic artist change it to say Anytown dealership. So these are real numbers. Where it says X time in dealership versus X time call center. So call center was us, and X time in dealership was their service advisors that were setting appointments in the lane. So a couple things. The first thing I want you to take away is the delta. 86 minus 73, everybody, is what? 13. All right, let's unpack that. 13, remember they told us when we got in this business, it's a numbers game, right? It's still a numbers game, but this is one of those numbers you want to have close to you. This is a moneymaker. Let me show you why. When you centralize your calls, your show rate goes up. And if any of you want to dialogue on this 24/7, I would love to, because I've learned so much about the space just in this one area. Sending the calls to the drive, yes, those folks are super skilled and knowledgeable. The question is, are they available? Are they undistracted? And are they focused and ready to deliver a statement of work consistently every time? And that's where it falls apart, those last three questions. So when you send it to a place where that's all they do, whether it's at your place or virtual, you're going to see a lift in show rate. So for every 100 calls, there's 13 additional vehicles sitting in a stall at your store, times $300 a piece. That's what that means. You say, but John, yeah, Dave, I see you go. I see you, Dave Mumford. Good. So you get it. Ed, you get it. So 300 times 13, 3,600. 3,600 times 10 times that number, 36,000. That's what show rate does with a service BDC. And this has been one of the hardest things for us to teach. It's just amazing because on the front end, Les, on the front end, if I told this story, I mean, it's like caged animals. But in this space, it just took so long to get this hammered home. The ones that do get it, I mean, it's set it and forget it. They already know. They just smile and nod, just keep going. So show rate is your friend. Keep going. I'm going to show you another thing here. I wish this next one was animated. This is the PDF version, but the top, I do this in an animated format, but I want to just say, okay, guys, just assume 100 calls. We're going to send the top row to the service drive. We're going to send the bottom row to the BDC. The difference is twice the money, $9,000 versus $17,875. Let me show you how that happens. When we send it to the service drive, 100 calls, 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 5 are missed. So we really only got 80 calls. Now, maybe in your market, those 20% just, they're so loyal to you. They just, no, honey, I'm going to keep calling Ed. I'm going to keep calling Ed and his team back, right? Or they call Meineke or Pep Boys or somebody else, or they just put it off, right? So really, we take 100 and we dilute it to 80. And then the 90% of those calls are going to be appointment related. Okay, so remember this, 90, 80, 80. If you're making a note, write down those 3 numbers, 90, 80, 80. 90% of your incoming calls should be appointment related. 80%, 80-some percent should be scheduled, and 80-some percent should close in a 30-day cycle. That includes work in progress, everything. Okay, those are, you say, John, as a catcher, fielding all these pitches, what do you see? I just gave you the 3 numbers. Those are the 3, okay? So 90% are appointment related. Scheduled is going to be lower with an advisor because of what they say and don't say, because of how distracted they are. Okay, so you're going to run about 65% schedule rate. Have a customer experience survey done on your store. Listen to those calls. You'll see. So we just took 100 opportunities and we have 47 scheduled, just like that. Do the math. That hurts. The show rate is 71% because of what we don't do in that call, because they're also multitasking, but we did put $9,000 in the till. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying we're not wringing the towel out. We're not getting all of what's there for us. The BDC, they got one job. Put the glove on, frame it for a strike, right? And so 90% appointment related, you're going to set somewhere in the 80s. 85% is easily attainable at 77 versus 47. You're already 30 ahead. Your show rate's going to be higher. The next time we sit mid 80s, but you're going to. We have stores that sit higher than that. I bet you Sarah Van Tine is probably close to 90% show, maybe even in the 90s. Okay, and so the bottom line is it pencils out, so it pays. Let me get to the next slide. Remember this concept. There's types of calls. This is not meant to be exhaustive, but very simple. There's appointment related, but you want to know how many in every period. There's status. We want to take update promise and good tools like that and decrease those status calls. The amount of savings when you decrease that through texting and natural updates is powerful. And then you have non-appointment related. So we want to track that. Next slide. So now that we have this tracking process in place, you want to mine your call data. All of us are gray enough to remember Mr. Miyagi, right? And so you can see there he is with Danielson doing the wax the floor, right? And we got to paint the fence and wax the floor. So I'm so glad the video is not working tonight. This is great. So Daniel is smiling now. He's happy. But 5 minutes earlier, he was pissed because he was tired of painting fences and waxing floors, you know? And he's like, this is child labor. Something's wrong here, right? And finally, Mr. Miyagi, I need to show him. You know, and here come the moves. So that's kind of what I'm saying to you. I just talked about these steps. You're going, Traver, where are you going with this? So let me show you where I'm going with this. By having the process in place that I just took you through, let me show you what you now have sitting in a tool chest. Go. First of all, remember when we click on the little filter that tells us why they're calling? Well, you're going to know what percentage of appointment-related calls you have 24/7, 365. You're going to see changes and trends. You know already you need to be somewhere in the around 90% appointment related. So let me ask you this. If that's 77%, does that tell you something maybe? That's a problem. And I will tell you where you're going to look first, the status calls. You're going to find most of the time, 2/3 of the time, you're getting so many status calls, the percentage of got it. Like we just took on a top 50 group in the United States that the amount of calls they were getting, it didn't pencil. I'm trying to get my head around it. And it was status calls. Just so many status calls, and it could have been fixed, okay? So there's that. Appointment-related dispositions. So we can kind of get into that and become, okay, of those, how many got scheduled? What if it's not 80? What if it's 60? Well, I'll tell you what happens. You get 3 HVAC jobs in a day, and the way you have the scheduler set, we can't set an appointment book for the next 4 weeks out or something, right? And so your scheduled appointment percentage begins to drop. So Bob Gower, Kevin Dittmar, Reba Davidson, our client services team, Karen Russ, those guys will interface with our clients, with our service directors, service managers. And we literally each month will walk through this with them, and they can nail stuff that has a leak quick before they get in deep water. And so it's just so easy once you're able to just take 3 minutes and look at it. Next. Beyond that, 18, that's right. When you start getting into it and you go, okay, the non-appointment related, what are they? What's the nuisance calls? How many of those are status? How many for parts? How many for, we found stores that have F&I trees, call trees that are routing the service. And you can fix that quick. Average mileage band. I know the DMSs do it. We do it in real time because in every call, we always will ask for mileage, and then the mileage will bucket by the 10,000 on the odometer. So 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and so on. So we can begin to look at stores and really know per RO if we have an issue. If we have a young store that doesn't have a lot of units in operation, we know what we need to do for that store versus a mature store that has plenty of 40 to 75,000 mile vehicles on the road. Track appointment requests, how far out are customers having to wait? That's the backlog. So when they tell us, we're able to track this, okay? So, and then the last piece is, as a result of painting fences and waxing floors, slide 19 is, there it is, good cue, nice job, Dave, thank you. Mining your primary market areas. So we all know we got a 15-mile radius. So here's an example. We took Google Maps, and we know a couple things about every bin. It's registered to a customer who lives in a zip code, and we take that zip code and we pin it. So every time we take it in real time. So one of the things that I always found interesting is how long we had to wait to react to information that was being fed to us by the OEM, say for marketing, service marketing in this case. So what we did is we said, look, we already know where that car exists. And when that call comes in, it's registered to the VIN. So why don't we deck it? So we, just like you see, it goes to a map, then it goes to a table right below the map, and you can open up that table by zip code in descending order and actually look at each customer, even listen to the calls. Everything is in order by zip code, so you can see literally where to spend. And when you get to the bottom of that, you can take out your weakest zip codes, reappropriate that spend up top. So that's just one more example, okay? Next, 20 is what I'll call a financial marker. I'm a big believer in what they call the critical number, and Jack Strack has a book that he wrote on this concept, and I'll tell that story another time, but let's jump on to 21. The critical number in the service BDC cycle is, remember, it could be operational or it could be financial. In this case, it's financial. But when you look at what's going on, if Sarah were with us tonight, I would say, Sarah, do these look familiar to you? And she'd say, oh yeah. And she's juggling all this stuff. By the way, if you have a BDC, technically, these are all the moving parts of a BDC. And, I can see some of you guys, your eyes are rolling in the back of your head. And that's, yeah, because you're juggling so much. But call quality, is that important? Yeah. Calls per hour, calls per day? Yeah. You got people come in and go home. And how'd we do today? Good, 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 good. I can't cash good. I don't know what good is. It doesn't have a number, right? Average talk time. I mean, we've had people work for us that on a 3-minute call, they run 8.5. I mean, they don't just get to know you, they get to know you well. That's not good, And some customers will put up with that, but honestly, that's not a good look. And that could be happening in your store. Technology, tools, systems, are we enabling them or disabling them? Training and skills, is it one and done, or do we have recurring stuff? We get a new recall. Do we just tell them there's a new recall, or is there a learning management system that walks them through exactly how to talk about it? You go, John, I don't have time for that. Exactly. But that's the front line. Those are the folks we got to equip. That's why I believe there's so much opportunity in this space. And then average speed to answer, we want to solve that. The bottom line is when you have a big list like that, you should always be wary, because when everything is important, nothing's important. So you got to get to the main number. So go to the next number, and I'll show it to you. So if you look at the cost per hour, it's very simple. I got two types of stores, 500 to 750 ROs per month and 1,000 to 1,500. So that may or may not speak to you, but it gives you the first idea. What you want to do first is look at, okay, when are we open Monday through Saturday? And so let's say both stores are 70 hours a week. You got 4.3 weeks in a month, so they're both open 301 hours a month. A 500 to 750 RO store is going to need 2 to 2.5 people. If they pay $12 an hour, I'm not telling you to pay 12. I'm just saying if, and you include Uncle Sam and Fringe, you're at 1440 times 2.5 times 172 hours in a month work. That's $6,192. And for some stores, 6,192 reasons why they won't have a service BDC, right? It's just too much. They're going to go, are you crazy? We're not going to spend 80 grand to answer the phones. I just showed you 36,000 a month just in show rate. So it's there, but it's got to be assembled. The next one is 4.5 people, so you're at 11 grand. So you say, okay, what's the cost per hour for an in-dealership? You take those people, you divide by the 301 hours, you can spend $20 an hour or $37 an hour. You take and you outsource that, and that store is going to spend between $4 and $7 an hour, depending upon how many they actually cover, and 10 to 20 hours. So you can see quickly how this thing, it's about a third to a half when they outsource. Do I think outsourcing is best for all stores? No, I don't. But I do think when you start looking at a blended approach, or for some stores it is the right approach, but a blended approach is a ton of savings. You can drive down your dollar cost averaging of staffing and building a BDC. Okay, next is some in-dealership tools and systems. So let's jump on 24. The very first thing I would talk about is if you're going to build your own, you're going to want to have the right ad. You're going to want to have the right interviewing process. You're going to want to have the right job description and comp plan. So really map this out. And this is something we do. We do in-dealership BDCs as well. We bring the training. We oversee this process. But little things like, do you guys do phone interviews before you bring them in? Because they're going to be on the phone. So why spend any time, physically and burning gas before we've actually had an intelligent conversation on the phone interview? Pay range, you're going to want to be in the 13 to 17 range in most parts of the country. I can think of some outliers, Wuchie, Iowa, whatever. It might be 12 to 14, but I'm just saying overall, 13 to 17 is a very powerful range. 10 to 12, as you get lower, it's going to drive turnover, okay? You're going to want to have an inbound versus an outbound and a hybrid plan because they're different types of people. Next, the learning system in 25, that's right. There you go. The approach we've taken is that Canadian see, hear, do model. Les, tipping my cap to you, right? See, hear, do means I'm going to explain it to you. I'm going to show it to you. Then I'm going to explain it to you, and then I'm going to have you do it. And too often in training, we just talk. They still don't have the idea. And so they're trying to put 2 and 2 together, right? See, hear, do is the fastest, deepest, longest lasting approach to training. So what we do is we take that, we break it up into small chunks, modules for learning. So like here's the internal LMS that we use, everything from welcome to oil types, types of service, care plans, you name it. And there's quizzes built in. So we know what the learning capacity is. You can take a new agent in the store and have them up to speed within the first 3 days of being there, because everything is mapped out. But most stores, like we went into a large group last year, Bob and I, and they were spending 60 grand a month just in payroll in their BDC, and it's now disbanded. And they wanted some feedback. And the very first thing I said is, when you're handling training, can you show me? Well, what I do is I have them go side by side. Oh, okay. Do we have anything in writing? No. Do we have any quizzes? No. They're in trouble. That's not going to get you where you want to go. So you got to document this stuff. Tools like this are available. This is one of the things that we do. 26. hands-on, again, see, hear, do. This is where they get a chance to do keyboard time, receive live calls. There's a testing out process. That's how you'll want to do that. Next is once you have them in the saddle and they're riding the horse, you would 27, there you go, Dave. You want quality assurance. So silent monitoring is where your BDM or somebody in charge is able to listen to those calls while they're talking to a customer. Very powerful, because I can whisper, I can say, Ed, remember to ask me. And the customer can't hear it, and they're remembering in context. And you do that during the week, and you touch them once, twice, 3 times a day. Very powerful. Call scorecard system. You know, what you want to do is have the steps of the call. You want to have those calls recorded and a scorecard that goes right to their desktop. You want to do that 10 to 20 times a month. Have an automated tool that can do that. Also, let the student become the teacher. Give them training windows, 20 minutes a week, where they're off the phones. They can listen to calls, have a blank scorecard, and they can score, you know, Les Silver's call, Ed Roberts' call, Mike Vogel's call, right? And that when the student becomes the teacher, I'm a lot more careful about what I do next when I go live. Very, very powerful. So there's that. You can jump down to the next one. So just kind of a recap, the 5 that I wanted to talk about tonight, you can go to 29. You know, the KPIs, again, remember the end in mind as appointments. It's a consistent experience that's going to mirror the high tech experience in the store. And, you know, the advisor selling time, you know, you guys have all watched Shark Tank and you've seen Mark Cuban where he says, hey, Joe, I love your idea, I love your energy, but it's really not a business yet. And my time's worth more than my money, so I'm out, right? That's return on time. And that to me is the most powerful. When you can begin to move the needle $40, $50, $60, $70 a repair order because you simply give advisors the time to sell, and you multiply that by 1,000 ROs, 1,500 ROs, and now you have something. Now you got something, but you got to give them the time. Desktop tools, that's showing you the wax on, wax off, paint the fence. When you begin to put the right tools in place, you know, 2 and 3 is the call tracking, and then 4 is the actual. Okay, here's your reward. Now you have this information at your fingertips. You can pivot, make decisions quickly, and off and away you go. And then 5 is, if I want to do it on my own, here's the model I'm going to have in place. I'm going to have a recruiting model, hiring model, training model, and a retain model. There you go. All right, Dave. It's 7:55, buddy.
Flying through that.
And I don't want to get in trouble with after hours either. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, terrific. Let me get rid of my screen share so I can see everybody's smiling faces again. All right. Anybody have questions for Les? For John? I'm looking at Les. Questions for John? I know we kind of ran through that pretty quickly, but questions on BDC or anything fixed ops related, actually. It doesn't have to be just what he just spoke about. Quiet group tonight.
Dave, why don't you introduce your new folks?
All right. Yeah, that's a good idea, Ed. So John and everybody here, John, our featured expert. On my top corner is David Munford. He's a Toyota TXM. Am I saying that properly? I'm not a Toyota guy. TXM advisor who is out of work right now due to the lovely situation. But he's here joining us for his first session, looking to get himself some knowledge. Thank you, Gene, for bringing David to us. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me, guys. This has been really good. Been really good for me. And my general manager actually told me today, he's like, dude, when you're off work, use your personal email, go get all the training you want to get. So I'm just taking advantage of all this. So when I get back, I can be better at my job.
There you go. And if your GM was wise like Dustin Corbett is, he would have you using the store's email, getting that training, and knowing that you'd be helping his store out when you come back, and not just having you do it all on your own. But we are happy to have you.
Thank you.
Suzanne Rogers, who has no video and is muted, but also a new participant tonight, and Stephen Granger is also new, although you were with us a couple of weeks ago too. So welcome back. And Roger was with us for the last few weeks, but I haven't done any introductions. I got to get better at that. I see people doing that on Facebook all the time, Ed, like, oh, welcome our new members to the group. And I'm like, how do these people track this stuff? Keep going back through their friends list and seeing who's signed up. But anyways, so now that I spoke for a while, anybody think of any questions for John?
Hey, John, I have a question for you. What is your feeling on artificial intelligence generated phone calls as opposed to human interaction?
So AI was very, obviously you can lower costs, right? So it's an overhead game, I think. What we've seen on the outbound side with AI calls.
Can you speak up, John?
I can. How about that? Better?
Better.
Okay. The AI play is on our radar. We've played with it for about 2.5 years. Here's my takeaway so far. On the screen, service scheduling inbound, it's got to be able to take them all the way in order for it to be credible. If it's make, model, miles, we'll have a service advisor contact you. It's not going to be a sticky tool, so it's got to take them all the way. If it's outbound, we haven't made that work yet. I mean, like, you know, there's so many robocalls today, Paul, that, you know, to make a live call, to have the right outbound process set up, and that maybe is another discussion, but there's a strategy and a way to do that where you can get to numbers. And if it's an intelligent conversation, the right offer, you're probably going to go farther, faster, for less with real voice on the outbound side.
Because there's technology now where the outbound calls for recalls and service appointments and things like that can take them all the way through.
Correct. You know, Global Connect under GM, we're a GM vendor, approved vendor, and we're watching this. We're actually testing a few new tools that they have. The key to that, Paul, is the statement of work has to be somewhat static. So it's like, if you already know if there's an if-then in the field and you can drive it, then you have to create predictors for every possible scenario or most scenarios. AI is still coming. It's not fully resolved. How's that?
Did you see that Google call where the computer made a outbound phone call and the person didn't even know it was a computer?
It's so cool. I did. Good question.
Good stuff. Thank you, Paul. Again, so quiet.
Yes.
You guys just going to sit here at the after hours and not say a thing?
Everybody's waiting.
Zoom meetings out there, Dave.
Are you guys zoomed out? Are you doing more Zoom calls now than you've done in your entire life?
Yeah, there's a whole lot. Although I'll say, Ed, from my side now being with Ford, I'm and he'll never be on this call, but I'm more than happy to virtually meet with my Ford reps and have them come and sit at my desk.
Yes, I agree.
That's an awful thing to say, but man, oh man, if I have to hear the words, let's take a deep dive on this one again. Is that a Ford thing, deep dive? Because the guy that was above him called me and he was using the same things.
That's probably a regional thing for them.
Yeah.
But most of those guys nowadays, and I don't think it's just with our brand, but most of those guys are box checkers. They're sent out by the manufacturer. Go check these 6 boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they're measured on the percentage of dealers that checks all 6 of them.
Yeah, right. Terrific. All right. Well, with no more questions for John, I really thought we'd get more questions for John, but John, thank you very much. Certainly the service BDC is an extremely important part of our business, and just so there's no misunderstanding, when I asked that question, when I posed that that thought to John that our advisors should be handling the calls and not a BDC, that's not my opinion. I was just giving him some fodder for tonight. I know my advisors shouldn't be handling every call that's coming in. So, John, appreciate you being here. Great information. We'll have you back when we can solve our technology issue down there. It might just be too warm. You might have to come up north where it's chillier. Technology works better.
So be it. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you to our sponsors, Fixed Ops Digital and Fixed Ops Magazine. Ron was not with us tonight. Owen was also not with us, but I don't have a mug from Fixed Ops Magazine, and I don't have Ed's mug on the Fixed Ops Magazine to show you this week. But thank you to both of them for supporting us and helping to bring this to you guys every week. So we are all set for this week. Next week, I believe I screwed up this week with John, but Les, are you next week? Yes. All right. So I got one right. Les Silver next week, everybody. So I got that right. So we are done here for the Fixed Ops Mastermind. And for anybody who feels like sticking around for the first ever Fixed Ops Mastermind after hours, just hang on through that awkward goodbye Zoom that the video Mike put up. And
That's right. I got everybody prepped on this. So is everybody ready?
Everybody's
Does
ready.
everybody know what we're talking about? Laurel and Hardy's goodbyes.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye, Ollie.
Bye.
Come on, guys, unmute your microphones.
Let's just get our
Bye.
Terrific.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Ollie.
That is wonderful. All right. So I'm not going to click end meeting because that's going to wipe everything out. But I'm going to, with no objections, I'm going to leave the recording going in case something amazing happens here so we don't lose this. But this I will cut this off. This part will not go into the mastermind website for consumption afterwards. This is only for our enjoyment here.
Dave, you can always get a backup from the NSA, so don't sweat it, man.
Excellent. Excellent. I have my my wireless set up as CIA drone surveillance. That's what it says.
You must talk to my 22-year-old son.